Hey, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Conversations, the show where we have conversations about the things that matter to people that we're maybe not having enough conversations about, or at least in my opinion, the things we're not having enough conversations about. Tracy decides, but it's based on your feedback. So remember, if there's a conversation you want to have, well, let us know. I'm Tracy Borison, host of the Conversation Show, and I mean, there's really not much more than that. Besides, we're here to have conversations. Two people having conversations, exchanging thoughts gives us opportunities to grow, learn, explore new things so we can help develop our own personal brands, our own beliefs, and help learn more about other people along the way and create insights. Hopefully, well, we haven't been through one show where we drop no nuggets of wisdom for you guys. So nuggets of wisdom will be provided as well as we go. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, or for those of you who join us quite often, let us know that you're here. Pop in the comments. We want you guys to be part of this conversation as well. So please let us know you're here. If you have thoughts, insights, questions, expertise that you want to share as part of the conversation today, please do. We are here to amplify as many voices as we can in this area we're going to talk about today, which is belonging. And specifically belonging at work, but there are some external factors that may drive our conversation around belonging in general. Today, we're going to try and drive it back to this concept of belonging at work. And I am so excited to have my friend Paul here with me to have this conversation, because if we're talking about belonging, there is no one else I would rather talk to about it. So we're going to explore the topic with you guys today. And again, ask your questions, add your thoughts. Every perspective is valuable, especially when I'm going to let you define belonging the way you define it, because I love it and I'm not going to steal your thunder. So Paul, give us a little introduction of who you are, why the topic of belonging is so important to you, and can you please share with us your definition of belonging? Because that's going to drive the conversation today.
All righty. Well, thank you very much, and especially for the gracious introduction there. What I do, I guide people into belonging, into their own belonging, to belong with the self, with each other, and hopefully to really belong with their own brilliance, to come out of that with in a place where they live to their fullest, and whether that's taking a company and making it a phenomenal place to work as a senior leader in the company, that's fine, or even just in teams level, and how people can work together to truly belong, to actually have each other's back, to, instead of fight flight, go into unite and fight together in that space, because that's a totally different space. But then the definition of belonging I'll throw out there is this. It's when it's okay. I'm going to give you a not first. It's not when you get a hug, when you feel affirmed, someone says a nice thing about you, or even includes you per se. That's not belonging. It is warm fuzzy, and it's really important that we have these things. Absolutely. Life without a hug sucks, period. But belonging is when you feel, own, and care for somebody in their successes, dreams, and failures, and they feel, own, and care for you in your successes, dreams, and failures. This bi-directional space where you really have each other. And if we were to use, today's big terms, it's the empathy, feel. Own is the accountability. Like for me, I have to show up here, that because you're here, you're extending to me in care. I got to show up. That means I feel this. It's not necessarily I'm doing this because you did this. It's a reciprocal, because I care for you and I don't want to show up like a total buffoon on your show. I just don't want to do that. I might do that by mistake, but I don't want to do it, just lackadaisically. But there's an ownership component. That's where we use the language. You're my new friend. You're my belonging friend who gets this stuff too. My dog, my mom, you have your, and then we do function this way. And that's actually more about accountability than possession. And then the last one is care for. It's really simple. You got to care for each other. That's what having each other's back is. You can say all you want. Oh gosh, I feel for you. And you can even say, yeah, you're my friend, but all of a sudden you don't show up in the end. there's not much there. And belonging is that relationship space. And you're in this state of relating where you feel own care for each other and in its totality. And it's not just for the wins, not for the high performance. It's also for when things suck. And that's why it's in successes, dreams, and failures.
Yeah. And I think for whatever reason, I think when we think about belonging in the bigger picture way, we do think about it as this reciprocal relationship, but somehow that reciprocal relationship, it doesn't, if we're not making it the intention, then it doesn't stay forefront, and then decisions start to get made on other intentions, right? So if we're talking specifically about work, and Paul brought this up actually for those of you who saw his post promoting this event. It was about, most of the time, if not all of the time, a business is originally created because two people were creating belonging together, right? They cared about each other. They were out to accomplish the same thing. And so we were like, hey, let's get on this path together and let's go there together. And then
you said also, but you said, where to go? Because it starts that way.
Yeah.
I mean, if we want to even go org dev, I've got a whole group of my company that is so dysfunctional, and they're always feeding off of each other. That's nothing more than belonging happening in a space where people in the company, where belonging might be lacking for them, is going on. They're not necessarily bad. They may not belong. And the truth is, they may not belong. They may not adhere to the values. They may not adhere to the purpose because they don't care about it. But they do care for a paycheck. But that doesn't make them belong. Mm-hmm. But to that point, though, if I wanted to do something that's bigger than myself, I'm going to have to call somebody cool like Tracy and go, I think the world would be great if we did this. And I'd love to create a space where we make money, AKA a growing tribe, to bring this about in the world. And like I say, I will not avoid the topic of money when talking about belonging, because that's part of the measure of a growing business and tribe. And so, I mean, it's amazing. The money shouldn't matter. It's like, it does, but it's always less ultimately in the end when people care for each other. Mm-hmm. It's people, purpose, and pay. Look, we'll do it for each other, and there's nothing stronger than that. Absolutely nothing. There's so many even religious texts and ancient texts that even cover this. Purpose. We join each other's purpose. We'll meet, we'll find each other, we'll invite people into the purpose, and that happens. And then we're mercenaries. We'll just get paid to go in and do a job, and sometimes that's perfectly fine. I'm not ready to belong somewhere. I belong with my family and this kind of stuff, and I'm just kind of want to go test the waters and see how it goes. Mm-hmm.
So I think this is an interesting direction to go with this, Paul, because I think to some degree belonging is a basic human need. But what if you have you feel like you belong at home? And this is not a thing for everybody. I will say, in terms of the spaces I belong, my mm-hmm. family doesn't rate at the top of that. They're not non-existent, but they're not at the top. So do you think we limit ourselves by saying like, well, we belong here, so we don't need to belong elsewhere?
We can easily create that limit. But this raises a really interesting point. So the thing about belonging, and I got a little bit chided by a few people on this, and I'm okay with that. It happens. Belonging is also a boundary. And this is where, to use the example of the CEO going, yeah, what am I supposed to do with this group of people? Well, find out if they belong. Are you doing what I asked was, are you doing what they need to belong in this company? And the definition is, there's a set of core values that's the tribal ways. Okay, my definition of company culture is the ways you belong plus the ways you get shit done. And that's your belonging culture operating system and your organizational operating system. And they intertwine, they're woven together. But if I belong somewhere, it's really simple. I am going to enjoin myself to the ways in which they belong, which is point 4, joining in story. You're marrying yourself intellectually and emotionally to a company. If you're unwilling to do that, well, then it's not belonging. So that there's a limit there. There's a boundary. So belonging is both an embrace, a place where you can be held and someone has you and so on, but it's also a boundary. If, like, for example, if we committed to do something and I didn't show up for you, apparently would I belong with you? Maybe if one happens, it's a mistake, and maybe I still do. But if I continually do that, do I belong in this dyad of a tribe with you in that space?
Yeah. And I would say it's interesting that you reframed that, because I actually had this happen once on a live where I was scheduled with a guest and she didn't show up. And I was like, because I knew enough about her from other things, I was like, oh my gosh, something must be wrong.
Right.
Like, she wouldn't just ghost me. We had this on the calendar. And so, like, I was reaching out to her, and then she finally got back to me. She felt terrible about it because she was like, this is what's going on. And I just forgot. And I was like, dude, I'm not at all upset. Like, you said family stuff going on. Like, I would have made the same decision as you.
Well, and that, but this is also another good point. It's even in the development in a company, which is belonging takes time. This is why, like, onboarding is so important in a company, to actually bring somebody in. And I'll touch on what I believe there are 6 areas. There's the actual belonging itself, the ways that you live in those values. These are not every little value, not the 14 values that you might find at Amazon. These are the 2, 3 at most core values that thou shalt not violate. Because when you violate them, it's like, well, that's not in the tribe. And so there's bringing somebody to that so that they can start adopting those and bringing them personally inside. The second space of that is the purpose. And this is where, purpose should matter. No, the purpose matters. When you care about something, and this is always about the heart, aka why I'm wearing a Spock shirt.
Oh, hiding the Spock shirt. Terrible timing.
I'm late here. I feel, hey, Yogesh, I'm glad you belong, and feel free to belong right here, right now. Yes. And there's Vicky. Back to totally lose my train of thought. I'm sorry. Just I know some of these cool people. But at that point, you had a background in history that you drew upon, which said, I have in successes, dreams, and failures. And there was a failure there. And I know people don't like the word failure. Who cares? Get over it. We fail. I fail a lot. We're human. Imperfection is the reality.
Yeah.
But so the second one is purpose, though. So to belong and to believe in the shared purpose and go into that space. And what really matters in that is that's like the 2 anchor points that have to show up on a tribal level. And because otherwise, let's just face it, if you have a whole bunch of belonging, it usually turns into a kegger. And that's especially if it's a bunch of dudes running the company. And I clarify.
I don't know. I've been at a kegger where I'm like, I need to get out of here. This is not
right. No. But that's exactly what happens. Nobody cares about the purpose. They're just there for the money. And people join up and they're doing this. They love the people they're with, but then they're like, fingers tapping on the table. Yeah, I'm out, because they don't have this shared belief that they're moving towards together. And so they're not part of anything bigger at that point. Which then the third part that comes in is, can a person be truly themselves, living from their values and living in those values from their strengths? Now here's the kicker. The values don't have to be identical to the company values, but they do have to be congruent, in alignment, however you want to say it. I really don't care. But if their core values that they would live from always come into conflict with the core values of the tribe, it's gonna suck. And there are people say, well, they should be able to do it. No, that's part of the being of the tribe, part of being of the company, is to be that way, to care about that, to treat each other in a certain way. Like, I will never fault Amazon from the standpoint of not living their values. Oh, they live their values, and they live it in spades, and at least to certain types of human interactions. but they do live their values.
Mhm.
I wouldn't choose to live those values. So that's where, guess what? I guess where one of the questions is, if you want to find out where you belong, start asking where you don't belong.
Mm.
Maybe I don't belong there because there's a core set of values that, well, I live by something that's going to put me into a bad place all the time. So there is a self-defining and a self-limiting, to your earlier question.
Mhm.
Then once you know this, you marry your join in story, and then you got to own your practices. And this is also part of the belong. If we're doing something together and I keep fuddling in your way and micromanaging you, you're like, let me do my shit. Oops, sorry. Sorry. And it's going to create this bad place of belonging because I'm not in the good caring for space.
Mm.
It's part of caring for, like, I don't have kids. Do you have kids?
I do. Yes.
Okay. When you were letting your little one learn how to walk, there was a point where you let go. And luckily they're low to the ground, so when they fall, it doesn't hurt that much. And
they're bouncy,
flexible and bouncy, yeah. But there's that same space where you let go, and people, and let's just face it, we like to own what we do in life. I don't like, raise your hand if you don't like to be told what to do. That's me. Now I do like to work together with people, though, and I love that coordinating and even that wrestling to get to that point. But that having the practices matters, and then growth. And back to this whole thing. Oh, the money shouldn't matter. It's business. It's how you know the tribe is alive. It's just that tribes before, maybe we were using dollars and whatever else. They said, well, we have this much grain stock, we have this many hides, we have this much going on. It's a representative thing. It's the same thing. And so the tribe has to grow. And if you think about it, if you're hanging around at a company and there is no personal growth, like, you have to grow, the company has to grow, and the customer has to grow, because the customer is part of the belonging.
Mm.
And if the customer is left out, we go, oh, we just have this. And that's part of the growth of the company. And then you could be growing all you want. It's like, yeah, this company's not going anywhere, which means I don't get to go anywhere else.
Mhm.
And then I leave. And then sometimes that's a blessed thing. That guy, his name is Chaz Horn, I think is his last name. He did a post where he saw one of his employees post something about, there's this job I would love to do, and I want to do it. And so he saw it. Now, he could have said, oh, I need to find a way to keep this person. Instead, he said, don't let fear hold you back.
Mhm.
See, that's the kind of boss you want. I'm not going to say he's a leader, not a boss. No, he's a good boss. But that's the space where you got to grow, and you got to make the belonging for growth in that. So if those 6 areas are covered, it's amazing. People don't want to leave anywhere.
Yeah, this is so interesting because I have, in my experience, values on the wall aren't always aligned with lived values of an organization. I don't think that's unusual. And it's just interesting.
That's part of being human.
Mhm. And because we're all interpreting these things in different ways, right? So, like, it's understandable how it happens, but it's so interesting because one of the values that I actually struggled with historically, for a company that I worked with, was eager to learn, right? And they just had a very specific definition of eager to learn, which was like eager to learn technical skills. Right.
Yeah.
And I was in marketing. So this included things like graphic design, web design, a whole bunch of things that I'm not actually interested in at all. And I like people growth, right? Like, I like learning about people. I like taking trainings about how to listen to people, how to like do that kind of stuff. And it wasn't the type of learning that was part of the curriculum
Right.
as part of eager to learn. And so I always thought I wasn't eager to learn because I wasn't eager to learn this batch of things I was allowed to learn. But it's just so interesting to look at it from this perspective now, being like, for me, what growth looked like was this. And for them, what growth looked like was this. And our growth trajectories were not the same.
Right.
And it's not that either one of the growth trajectories is wrong. They're just not the same.
Right. So now the ability, especially with getting to know oneself, and then I put that in the self-belonging space. when you start in, this comes from you, and also the mirror from others, and what reflects back to you that you interpret and get the picture of. And we will actually go, oh, this isn't my thing. And it doesn't mean they're bad. We don't have to polarize just because we don't belong as it's bad, which is that, if it's not a high inclusion space, this is bad. It's like, well, okay, here we go. I want inclusion and I want diversity. Well, does that diversity promote the ways in which we treat each other upon a set of core values? Yes or no? If the answer is no, that's going to be some pretty rough diversity to bring in. I'm not talking about variance of thought and so on. It says, of course, we do need that. The reason that the belonging, business is a creation in belonging is, oh, I want to do something. Oh my God, Tracy believes in the same cause, and she is a badass with marketing shit. I start losing my mind after a while. I wonder if she'd like to change the world in a certain way. And that's an invitation to get into belonging. I mean, this is what happens. Now, I'm not going to go, if this person has this value, it's like, oh, I'm asking for running into conflicts the whole time, over and over and over. And so there is this boundary, this criterion to be, to be in tribe Borison. Did I say your name right?
Yes. You did.
Okay.
That was great. And I think this is great too, because we're talking about kind of the self-belonging piece. Seb had a question about, this means we have to belong to ourselves first before we can find others to share a common sense of belonging. No.
How about yes and no? Because here's the goofiest thing about this. And feel free to tell me I'm wrong. I'm cool, because I could be completely wrong. But here's the yes and no with that. Every one of us was born into complete and utter dependency and belonging. And I'm not going to say that there isn't a nature part, because there is a nature part, but there's a nurture part. And we adopt the stuff from our parents, from our friends, and so on. But so there's a complete dependency. Let's flat out. If you're born, like if you didn't care for your kids would have passed away. Because, and here's the thing, it's not a kid, they're your kid. I'm going to say, feel, own, care is involved in this always. If one of those three is missing, your belonging gets hosed. Flat out. Like, quick tangent, and then I'll go back to this. The tangent. Oh yeah, you're my friend, but every time you see me, I'm looking over here talking and whatever else, and not paying attention to you. I'm not getting a feel from you. I'm not getting that. And then, but then, something happens, I show up and I help you out. It's like, well, I kind of belong, I think, because that's how our brains process. So from that standpoint, this comes in. And when we're raised, we're in a place of complete and utter dependency. At a certain stage, and especially as we start meeting other children and when we play and everything else, now the worlds start to collide, and we get interdependency. Now, in that interdependency, as we go, we start to get more in our autonomy, in the ability to see ourselves in a healthy space with self-belonging. So this is where I'll say it has to start getting it from somebody. And this is one of the things about belonging. And Andrew Moss made a comment once: to belong, you have to give first then. And the truth is, yeah. And you have to give first, knowing that it may not come back, because you're not giving to make something happen. You're giving because you are. AKA tough in the business world, because everything's an economic transaction to keep going towards that. If that's the capsule we have. Right. So what the question would be is,
here's Seb's response. Are we on a one-way ticket to Doomsville?
Oh my God, that's so funny. I love it. So, okay, here's the thing, but we don't have to be. And I did a little post when I think about my Native I should not know Native. That's old term. Sorry, I'm an old guy. First peoples in the what is the United States area. For thousands of years, the tribes lived together, in very deep belonging with their tribe and very good get along. If you look at the maps, they're all overlapping for where the tribes were. So we don't have to be doomed. We can choose and belong and get along. And so, but what we get though is now we move into this interdependency, and this is where our belonging, and we have to have self-belonging, because what happens, and this is where it really matters. Was Sebastian? Was that right? Yeah, Sebastian.
Yes.
What really matters is if we never get our actual self, a self-belonging, all we're doing, we are doomed. It is Doomsville to just fitting in. In the workplace, I would say 70% of workplaces tend to fall into it's fit in, not belong. And that's it's life between the carrot and stick. I'll use that thing. I've got a book I'm gonna finish here, and our need for belonging. But when it's all about just the carrot and the stick, its focus tends to be fitting in to get either of those things, not get punished, and get the carrot. When you belong, it's a deeper space. It's like what you did to the gal who couldn't make it. You went, no, wait a minute. I know you. You're mine. This isn't the mine that fits. I'm going to be curious. I'm going to go into the space. I'm going to find out what's wrong, and then I'm going to make a way so that you stay mine, and effectively, you stay hers. And
I
so,
think this is, I mean, all of this is so interesting to me, but one of the things on this the self-belonging that is coming up for me, my son right now is 4. And I feel like at this stage where we're learning to walk, or we're actually like fully dependent on another human, we don't have this concept of having to fit in, right? Like we just are ourselves, and we belong or we don't belong, right? But then as I don't know, I feel like junior high is specifically bad for this.
Wait, aren't we still in junior high, just a little older now?
Kind of. I don't think but this is it's like a pattern interrupt that happens at that age where you're like, oh, now all of a sudden me just being me isn't related to belonging. Now me trying to be something else is related to belonging. And we start to wear certain clothes or have certain friends. And which is, I mean, I feel like I was watching this from the time because I was like, this is really ridiculous, and I can't understand why like everyone is participating in this. I should just have the friends that like me, and I like them back, and I like to play basketball, and I like to do art, and I'll just do those things. But I feel like I'm unusual in that sense. But we start to learn that we should be different so that we can belong. But it's actually not belonging.
But that was what a perfect way to say it. We should be different so we can belong. Because if we're not being our unique, beautiful selves, our brilliant selves, we become cogs. And the system, our business world system changed with the scientific aspect of management coming in. This is really historical stuff, but Taylorism one scientific thing, which was to make it so that you had the most efficient model. Because efficient became the chosen model as opposed to what's the best model. Is it the best model is where people get to be truly themselves and do beautiful things and incredible feats at work. Because here's the other crazy thing. When you fit, you're very, very good at being average. Because that's the definition of what fitting in is. You're really good at being average. And some people, that is the pinnacle of their business model. If you want to talk about super high performance, that comes from belonging on two sides. One, the self-belonging of, oh, I'm trying not to swear. Oh, heck yeah. I can do this. And that's the self space and this belief, when people have confidence. Well, part of confidence is a self-belief. It's a place where you can feel, own, care for yourself. Yeah, I'm going to screw up. And like your 4-year-old's like, I keep falling down. I get pissed falling down. Oh, that toy was within reach. Damn it. Kind of thing. But what ends up happening is gets right back up. And I'm getting that toy. we can do that same thing in self-belonging, but self-belonging requires that I'm sitting across from Tracy and I see her face and all the oxytocin, serotonin, and dopamine stuff is flying in here in our responses, and I'm like going, I'm enough. I can do this. I can do this shit. Yeah. And that space happens in belonging. It gets eradicated in fit.
Mm.
This is where, the Navy SEALs, when they're sitting there carrying the boats around in the miserable thing, and they're trying to stay up as late as possible, sleep deprivation. They're laying in the water with the waves rushing over them, freezing to death, holding the log up together. None of that stuff is stuff they're going to do in battle, except for everything about mentally for each other that they will have. They have a deep, unbelievable belonging in that space.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what the training creates for. And that is a space now where they know, because of seeing and belonging with each other, that they have the individual capacity to do it. They have good self-belonging. And they also have this deep-seated, well, in their case, I will die for you belonging. And you want to talk about performance. This is where sports teams, this is where the businesses, where the people in the businesses know that my boss has my back. Then instead of it being about psychological safety, is it safe for me to take a step forward? No, it's I'm going forward and I know it's going to be risky. And this is why when I hear the debate of psychological safety versus belonging, I'll take belonging any day, because belonging means somebody will go into the risk with me and for me, and I will go into the risk with them and for them.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a whole different range.
Yeah. Well, that is where growth is, right? Like if you're constantly, and I felt this in my past before, right? Like this is where we need to go in this, whether it's taking care of a client or helping an employee deal with a mental health issue, right? Like all of this is where, and I'm afraid to go there because I don't have somebody who would have my back. And I think for me, that was, again, because we just had a very drastic values misalignment, and it just wasn't available.
Or purpose alignment.
That's also true. Yeah.
I'm getting
Alignment
ready,
was missing.
but I don't care. Yeah, but there's those elements are missing.
Right. And it's also like, there's just so many of these like little things that I think, we could probably have this conversation all day and come up with more and more little things, but like, you're here to do this, right? Like we give employees job descriptions, and then we're like, you're here to do this, and I'm going to judge you on this, and I'm going to fire you based on this.
Right. Yeah. So and that's where your fit is defined by that job description. It's not about you as a human at that point. And the same thing happens with, like, even in a profit space. I've known CEOs that just wanted to take care of their people because of the way the financial system is set in place. They have to generate a certain multiplier value within 3 to 5 years, or they're out. So now we've pitted. Oh my gosh, this is also taking me back to my first people's anthropology stuff. So I'm going to shift. So what ends up is they end up sacrificing their people for the sake of doing the business system, which creates the VC value for the thing. And I'm not against VCs and funding companies. Absolutely. I'm not at all. But there's a break in the system that causes us to create a fit business, not fit physically, but or mentally, but you have to fit, and or else you're out. First peoples, they would have potlatches, and they have jubilees, and they would have these things. And over a certain amount of years, the measure of an amazing chief was in the 50 year of a tribe. I think it's what it was. And God, Taylorism would kill me right now because I can't remember. Would be how much wealth the chief could give away. And this would cause this in the Salish area of the Northwest tribes in the United States. It would cause a redistribution of wealth. But the measure of success wasn't the hoarding, it was the giving.
Well, and this is the other thing, right? Like we create these structures that are very like I went to business school and there was underlying things that were teaching us this is what you should want, right? Like you should want to get to this point where you are hoarding all the money. And it's actually one of my like one of the reasons that I love to follow Dan Price. And I don't know if you guys know him, but he
Mhm,
runs a
mhm.
company called Gravity Payments. And like everybody gets the same base salary because everybody has a value proposition at the company, right? And it's just like these are little messages that we send to people
Mhm.
being like, well, if you're the CEO, you've put in your time, and that means you get to make multi-million dollars a year, even though it's a lot of other people who are making that work for you,
Yeah.
right? You don't touch marketing. The entire marketing department runs on its own, but we all get paid like teeny tiny amount. And then you don't feel like you do just feel like a cog. You feel like a cog in the
Mhm.
machine. And here's another thing I think play comes into the conversation for me in terms of belonging, like how I believe I belong in a space like that. Like I don't want to be a cog. I don't want to
Mhm.
participate in things that are average. I don't believe in average. I don't believe in the status quo. I don't think anybody at any of the companies I worked for ever asked me that or ever knew that about me because it didn't come
Oh.
up. I was just like, what I do as part of working in a bigger organization is I come and be a cog. And what I learned about myself is I'm terrible at being a cog, which is why I run my own business now. But I just like, I don't want to be a cog. I don't want to be average. So I don't want to be treated like that.
So it's interesting because there are some that go the entrepreneurial route, and for sure. Um, but even a person like say they like I know people like this. I've coached people like this. They want to do. They go to work, but their life, what they really live for, is the time that they spend with their families and the things they'll do with them. And but one of the things I do notice is none of them are content with doing an average job.
Mhm.
They always want to do better, even if there isn't this entrepreneurial element in like what I can't tolerate the ways we've always done this, you know, which is different than the ways you belong. And then this is an interesting thing business wise, and I'm curious if you had been in a space where you got to stay on purpose, choose your own way in accord with a set of values that you can adhere to that could work together with the companies and just shoot the moon, what would that have done? I know that's hypothetical, but
Very minimally, it would feel different.
yeah.
Right? I would have, I've shared this with a lot of people, but one of the things, the reason why I ended up quitting my corporate job was because I felt like it was chipping away my personal brand. So, like, the
Mm,
person Tracy was slowly
mm,
getting chipped away at every day. And I had to go and defend myself against that
mm,
chipping away. And so, if I didn't have to get dressed in my armor every day to protect myself, to go work towards a goal that I was aligned with, that I believed in. And like,
mhm,
quite honestly, a lot of them were, right? Like supporting people, communicating with people, right? Like all of these things I believe
mhm.
in, being helpful, right? But it just, I had to protect myself. And I actually said that to my boss once, and she was like, I hate when you use that language. And I'm like, well,
No,
that's how I feel.
and well, and if you think though, a fit in culture creates that.
Right.
And if hey CEOs out there, if you're listening, all the energy that Tracy, this you have Tracy's in your companies, all the energy that they have to spend to protect themselves and this is we're not talking pseudo or actual hostile work environment place. We're talking about just in a being of themselves in the space. Um, that's energy and commitment and time that could be going towards growing each other, the company, and making the client's world better, because the fact of the matter is, if the client's world is growing and better, usually the company is.
Yeah.
And it's just, I mean, but everybody has that, and that's one of the most major flaws, and it's Taylorist business practice, scientific management. This is how we create efficiency. Everybody follows the same thing. When an individual set of brilliance in a team, like a Navy SEAL team, they don't have a bunch of people that all have the same exact skills. They have specialists, and they have different skill sets, and they all come together as a team. Now, granted, they say, well, they're a small team. Well, your company is made up of a whole bunch of small teams, whether you like it or not, because that's how belonging works. And that's, I realize that's scary, because the second that happens, it goes to the old thing of like, these people aren't happy in my company. Yeah, because they both have a common shared purpose, sub-purpose of the company purpose, which is how they're going to survive in supposedly in this tribe that they're supposed to belong.
Yeah, super. I mean, all of these things are so complex, right? And I wanted to share that, Lisa, to answer your question, maybe better than I answered your question, was that it would create a motivated and productive employee.
Oh, absolutely.
And I think too, one of the things I always think of in terms of like creativity and innovation, right? Like it creates the space for that. It's like, how does creativity and innovation just didn't happen in my fit-in scenarios?
No, and it can't, because like you said, you're always at risk. You don't belong. You only exist in that space if, and what I love. Okay, so like creativity, and awesome, because you're a creative, you're in the marketing space. One of my favorites lately that I'm loving her book is Jane Evans. Oh, you would like her book. Oh my gosh, it's amazing. Is the creative space we talk about? We just need to create this space where they can do this and that. I have never seen more creative people than in a given very, very difficult situation. Their care for each other, their belonging for each other, puts them into a safety space that never happens in fit. Like we can, like the U.S. women's soccer team could be down by two goals nil, and they're in a risky place, and they will pull together at even a higher level than anybody who ever would fit in. And it's from that space that they start getting creative, because now they have the safety of belonging. Because let's face it, if you go into a jail in solitary confinement, in 15 days, you're getting permanent neurological damage, because that's what happens. We're not meant to be isolated. We're meant to belong. I mean, your kid grows up in a state of pure dependent belonging. That's how the cycle goes. And then we get interdependent, and then we get self-belonging and all that stuff. But that level of creativity comes out of people who, in a loving space, will go, we're going to figure this out. And this is, there's, I forgot, is it necessity is the mother of invention? No, I'm going to say it's belonging. It creates the space for the truest and the most immediate creativity. Like when you were making stuff and you were thinking about the client, were you connected with the client from a creative standpoint of like, this is where they are, this is what they're trying to accomplish, what they're thinking, or was it more of a, this is what the market's calling for, this is like this, so I'm just going to make this and give it to the client? What space were you in?
I was in both spaces at different times, but my preferred space was creation of a solution for a client. It was always the best.
So there's a part of it, because and some people will say ego is bad. Ego is not bad. Egomaniacal is bad. Everybody has ego. Everybody has narcissism. I'm not making a case to tolerate a narcissist and like an actual 9-point narcissist or anything like that. No. But there's that goodness that comes into play when we know and we like, nice job. And we have to do that. That's part of self-belonging, to say, oh, you're a badass. That's a serotonin blast going in. It's like, yeah, I got this. So when you're in that space and you're doing that with and for them,
Keep going.
What would that give to have that? Where were you in that? I'm curious. Were you in that place because since knowing him, we're by the way, we're new friends. I'm looking
Yes.
around the room like there's people in here. Um, I know. So we're new friends. Where did you draw upon that spark, that creative spark? Just since we hit creative.
So like belonging, although I didn't have the language of belonging at the time, was always really important to me. And I felt more belonging with my clients than I felt as part of the organization. So when I got to create something with a client that was fixing a problem, that was supporting people, that was making their life easier, it was just my jam. And like I would answer a client call on the weekend because they were having technical difficulties and troubleshooting stuff, and it felt fun for me because I was helping my client.
Okay, yeah, no,
I
okay, yeah.
was their account manager, right? We were a team.
Yeah, no.
But when I think about in my experience, the company on a bigger level, when there was like at the beginning of COVID, there was a lot of businesses that had to change substantially to navigate those waters, right? In the company I worked for, the CEO was the product designer manager. There wasn't a team, even though we were on the management team. But like we didn't participate in coming up with new ideas, discussing how we were going to address the market, right? Like that was her, and everything was top down. And then she would decide and we would do things. And I'm, as we talked about earlier, I'm not very good at just being told to do a thing, especially if I don't believe it accomplishes what we're trying to do. It doesn't align with the direction we're going. It doesn't support our people, right? Like I have questions, and I was just done being told to do things that weren't aligned with me.
Hey, wait, I just heard the Great Resignation right there. Uh, huh.
Yeah, and this is like Brian is sharing a comment here too in terms of fit and culture does not create the conditions for people to belong. From this place of belonging, creativity and innovation emerge organically. And this is, I just want to go back to what you said, Paul, about you being like someone actually having your back. Like if I have an idea, I share it at a meeting because I know that I'm not immediately going to be shut down, or like, no, you are in marketing, so you have no useful thoughts when it comes to operations or development services, right? And you're like, I've been in this industry for a minute. I think I have something that is valuable. And when someone else is treating you like your contribution is not valuable, this does not fit into the belonging equation.
Well, okay, so that's an interesting, and I'm gonna foil this against psychological safety. Psychological safety is you should be able to speak up and blank. I see where I think, yes, absolutely. I'm not saying that shouldn't be the case. But if that's the high mark, that's not putting it into the space of, say, I'm in a meeting with Brian, and I know Brian in his section of the company is dealing with a bunch of crap. And the power isn't that I can say something safely to help say something that would help Brian's section of the company. The power is in, oh, Brian's dealing with a total bag of shit, and I need to do something. Oh, if I say this other manager over here is going to be all pissy at me. And that means, so it's not about psychological safety. It's about, do I belong enough? And am I creating a space for people to belong? And I mean, this is a conscious thing, and then it becomes a habitual thing. I mean, everything we do is conscious and habitual. Anybody who says otherwise simply doesn't remember. But that space now is for somebody to go forth and do the people power of thing, to keep going in the purpose. And then pay is irrelevant at that point. I mean, it's never totally irrelevant, but that's a space where someone's willing to go into the uncomfortable. I mean, everybody wants to have courageous conversations, as it's coined, but how are you going to, are you doing it because you think it's safe, or are you doing it because you care? And you know it's going to have a teeny bit of risk, or might even have a lot of risk. I've been in the crosshairs in a company civil war before, and that was, I would not call it fun, but I chose to live in my values. Whether I made mistakes or not is irrelevant, but well, it's not.
Well,
irrelevant.
and as we said, we're all humans. So even going into this with like an intention of creating belonging and all this does not mean you're going to get it right 100% of the time, because that's not a thing. I think Jackie is sharing a super interesting point here about so much of this is fed by the compliance and conformity model of education.
Okay.
I feel like Paul can riff on this.
No, Jackie, I got a book for you. No, and this actually translates directly into this our more dominant current business model, which is a command and control efficiency model, and it's out of Taylorist science stuff. In the education, as it was designed late 1800s in crossing over into 1900, was made to create compliant, not brilliant people. Compliant people, so they could go into it. They could go into the factories and do what they were told, because that was the most efficient way. And Taylor was at one point, I would put it as infamous, but he was known as famous for saying, if we're doing this right, it's never about the people, it's always about the system. And that is, you're so correct. It's about compliance. And if you look, sorry, and I'm a former teacher, so this is where I'm saying this from. The traditional model is a prison system model for higher efficiency and control. It is not in the more creative model, and I'm going to call it more individualist brilliance model. And I can't remember the name of the scientist who was battling for predominance in the public arena of science back in that time period, but he lost. One was to look at unique aspects of individual humans and how they can get into their brilliance, and then find ways to create systems that way. The other one was to create systems that create averagarianism, which is, Jackie, the book is The End of Average by Todd Rose. He's a neuroscientist who failed miserably from the education system because it was not designed for him. It was designed for somebody who was going to be average. Marvelous book, completely dystopian. And the hard part about it is it's so true. But a phenomenal book. And the Audible is great because he sounds kind of like Rod Steiger from The Twilight Zone. And yes, I saw somebody made an age comment earlier. I didn't read what it was, but yes, I'm old enough to remember The Twilight Zone.
It's just that some of these things are classic and more people should be aware of them. Okay, you guys, I feel like we could actually continue just to have this conversation all day. But I do want to be respectful of everybody's time, although I think everybody is enjoying this and just hanging out. But I just want to just quickly go back up somewhere up here in the chat. What kind of going back to the Doomsville thing, right? If we already live in Doomsville, the good news is that our situation can only improve from here if we continue to have these conversations.
Yes. Actually, I to Yogesh on that one. Yeah. So this is I will. Oh, okay. So we all
go with it, Paul. Right? If we go long, we go long.
Okay. I'm sorry. Okay. So everybody has an inner voice, and everybody has their self-belonging. Now, sometimes that inner voice, the voices we allow in are from a space not of belonging, but a space of fitting in. And I call that's the inner itty bitty shitty committee. We co-opt these voices. We're not good enough. We need to fit in. We need to this and that and so on. It's a bunch of shitty voices. I said shouldy. But you also can have the voices that are part of your inner voices that feel for you, that care for you, and that own you. I did it out of order, but who cares? because those voices are just like, and I know, Tracy, you would always be saying things in ways for your child to keep advancing and growing and going, as opposed to, nope, you suck, stop doing that. I mean, hey, so that group, that set of inner voices for self-belonging is your inner itty-bitty gritty committee. It's in, if you get those voices and filter them by, is this voice feeling, owning, and caring for me in my successes, dreams, and failures? It's our voice is always cheering for us when we do something awesome. Hey, it's when we suck. We need to have a voice. And if that voice is, oh, I really loved how I was treated when I was hanging out with Tracy. I'm enough. I'm going to go to that space, that story. So I got the story I tell myself. And then my self-belonging and my self-talk changes, and it gets me out of Doomsville, because everybody's Doomsville starts in here, in that 6-inch space, where when we co-opt voices, and they could be parents, they could be friends, they could be bosses, they can be ourselves, you name it. But once we start filtering by voices that belong, we can actually start getting this. And a lot of times those voices will challenge us to be like, hey, quit sucking like that. You're better than that. Fine. Okay. I'll unsuck. But so, yeah. So Doomsville doesn't have to happen. And
well, and just to like kind of round this off, right? This is where like we roll that into belonging with people instead of just self-belonging, right? Because we all have those moments where we feel like we can't do it. We made a mistake. We're frustrated that maybe we made the same mistake twice, and you're just like,
or 12
I'm
times.
the worst. Yeah, I know.
No, actually,
we're humans.
So no, oh God, I'm sorry. We could go on for, but this is the paradox. We can belong with others, but if we, that's a dumb way to say it. In order to belong with others, we have to self-belong, and we can't self-belong unless we belong with others, because we're literally left with just one voice that, if we're close to a cliff, will tell us we're not good enough. And sometimes it's somebody going, hey, cut it out. All right. We need to hear this from somebody else. Come on. We got this. I've got your back. You can do this. I mean, it is never, and anybody who says it always has to start with me first, well, maybe you weren't an infant at one point where you were completely and utterly dependent upon somebody else, because we all have that interdependency.
Mm-hmm. And this is the power in that, though, right? When it comes to community, we often talk about like just a mirror, right? Somebody being able to like hold up a mirror and show you the light that you are, so you can look back at that and be like, I like that, and I can feel much more empowered, ready, capable of going and shining my light in front of other people, because I have that reflection. And that is what happens. It's funny because actually my ex-boss, who we talked about a lot today, she once said to me, like my ex-husband, she was like, you sparkle a little bit less when you guys are together. And I was like, ugh.
Oh, yeah, no. Like, it's just like,
that's the worst. Like, I wish someone would have told me that 10 years ago. I could have made a bunch of different decisions. And now, like, it's part of my journey, and I'm proud of it. And I have a wonderful husband now and wonderful son.
Well,
but
isn't that wait, hold on, one more thing, just because that's what a beautiful place to end is. In that space, you went to a great place of self-belonging. Mm-hmm. It wasn't the place where it wasn't Doomsville.
No.
It was, now you're in a place where you have something new and even better to go. Mm-hmm. And think of yourself as a masterpiece. Have you ever seen an X-ray of a masterpiece? There's layers and layers of totally effed up painting behind it. I mean, and then until they got to that, and then if they'd had more time, they probably would have done more. But that's the thing. It's those layers of things that are under us. Whether, we hate that we did them, because that's perfectly fine to go, oh, damn, I wish I hadn't done that. But to shame ourselves and not realize that some point in the future, that's going to be the success place where you get to share with somebody. And they don't have to make your mistake. And it's a superpower at that point.
And but even more importantly, they can know that if they do make that mistake, that you're in good company.
You're not alone, and you belong.
I see you and you belong here. Because let's be honest, there's going to be lots of people who get divorced. The future of the world.
Right? I've done it myself.
Yep. This is just, it's part of your story. And this is part of owning your self-belonging, but also the power in belonging versus fit. It's not about like erasing that part of me so I can fit in over here. No. It's about being all of that and having a place where you belong. This feels like a good place to stop for today, but I feel like we might have to have more conversations about belonging because this was awesome. I want to thank you guys for showing up in the comments today. You had such amazing contributions. We have Sebastian and Yogesh and Lisa and Grace is there, and Brian is there, and Jackie, Michael, Vicky, and Sejal. I think I got everybody. Hopefully I got everybody. I apologize if I missed you. There's just a lot of comments and I tried to scroll all the way back. But what an amazing conversation, which wouldn't have been what it was without your contribution. So thank you guys so much for showing up today. Thank you so much, Paul, for providing so many new things for us to think about and consider when we think about fit, when we think about belonging, when we think about how we feel in situations and how we show up. And we wouldn't have had access to those ideas without you today. So I want to thank you, my friend, for coming and sharing that with all of us. And the last thing I want to remind you guys, and Yogesh mentioned it in his comment, I'm not going to try and scroll and find it again. The piece about having these conversations, right? This isn't a one day, one time conversation. If you're looking to find more belonging in your life, or you're working for an organization, you're trying to create more belonging, it's not a one-time, one-off conversation. So connect with me, connect with Paul, connect with each other, right? Let this conversation about belonging blossom in all of your conversations. And I think that can only help everyone going forward. I just want to share this. She's not a super villain. Okay. I feel bad. There's people in life that are just not aligned. Me and my ex-husband not aligned. Me and my ex-boss not aligned. Right? Not a super villain. I by no means like to frame myself as some kind of superhero. I'm not that. I am me. I am here to create space to have these conversations so we can learn and find more self-belonging and more belonging with each other. So thank you all of you for joining me today. And until next time, everybody, permission to do you.